Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. Konami has been known to have some pretty terrible ban lists. Overall, they have had some good ones, but most of the time it seems like they are either going to basically slap the wrist of a deck that has been dominating the metagame, or they are basically going to nuke it into oblivion and say that you are never allowed to play that deck ever again. There is very little in between. Now granted, there are some instances where yes, you basically do have to nuke it into oblivion. For example, Sky Striker, it literally took them banning Engage and a lot of the other cards being limited in order for players to stop playing that deck, and then they still played the deck. So it is understandable in some instances. However, there are a lot of instances, specifically in Duel Links that I would like to talk about, where it wasn't really as necessary, and I want to specifically discuss the changes to these lists and why I'm not as big of a fan of the Duel Links ban list system, or just the Duel Links ban lists in general. They have mostly been either okay or absolutely neutering decks in their entirety. So let's quickly discuss things. Now, this is mostly going to be about the cards that have been limited instead of the skills, because some of the skills are just not notable. Like, yes, they did kill some decks, like, for example, Balance absolutely being nuked means that Noble Knights just literally went from tier 1 into oblivion. They just dropped off the face of the planet, even though they were literally the most dominant deck. So, okay. Sometimes it matters, and I will bring those up when I can. But let's start off at the very beginning with what I believe to be the first ban list that truly killed a deck, and that was not actually this one, but it does give us some context. So right now, Dyna and Donpa are the two for hire cards that are limited. Dyna is limited to 1, and Donpa is limited to 2. Now with the Duel Links ban list system, this means that you are only allowed to play any limited 2 cards. Only 2 of them. You can only play 2 semi-limited cards in your deck list, period, and you can only play 1 limited card in your deck list, period. So, if you had Dyna, you couldn't play it with another limited 1 card, and if you had Donpa, you couldn't play it with any other semi-limited cards. This is important, or you could only play 2 of any of those limited cards. This is important because on the next ban list, Wiz Sage for Hire was also limited to 2, meaning that now the Donpa, as well as the Sage, could only be played 1 and 1, or 2 of one of them, or 2 of the other. You couldn't play 2 Wiz and 2 Donpa. You could only play 1 of each, or 2 of the other 2. Right? Which means, basically, they've now limited to 3 separate cards, meaning that the overall deck consistency is in the garbage. Now, granted, this deck had been around for a while and was tier 0 at some point, but this basically kills the entire deck. No longer can you play any of the limited 2 cards, like Treacherous Trap Hole or Hey Trunade or something like that had been recently semi-limited. You also couldn't play Econ. You couldn't play extra copies of those cards to add consistency. The deck dies. There is basically no mention of this deck for years until it eventually comes off of the list, which is another thing that Konami tends to do, where they tend to just leave a card on the ban list for way too long. Eventually, when this deck did come off of the ban list, no one played it. It was terrible. Because it had been power crept into oblivion. It literally was not something that you could actually climb very well with. Some people did, but it was very few and far between, and it was a deck that a lot of people really liked. A lot of people hated to see it on the ban list because it was a deck that they thoroughly enjoyed. Well, I wouldn't say that they hated it, but it was a deck that people thoroughly enjoyed. And it was basically killed. That's the first instance. It will not be the last. Next up, we have this one. It is another limitation to, this time, Kawakimaru, with Maximus limited to 1 and Iron Core of Kawakimaru semi-limited. Now, this was a tier 1 deck, which was more or less notable because of the fact that it was just the first deck that could actually, like, pop a card consistently. That was, like, it. That's all it did. You summon this guy, 3,000 attack point monster, destroys a card. Very few decks could actually out this or deal with this in any meaningful manner, so poke, ya die. Now, granted, this one isn't nearly as bad, but it is the first instance where basically Konami made the deck also unplayable. The limitation to 1 Maximus as well as Iron Core of Kawakimaru being semi-limited was very painful. Mostly due to the fact that overall this deck just was already inconsistent. It was already pretty bricky because you did need to see the Iron Core. So there's that. But yeah, all in all, another one to chalk up as pretty mediocre. Next up, we have Xian's Dojo Semi-Limited. Now, this is an instance where instead of killing a deck, they literally did nothing. Xian's Dojo was semi-limited, and that was the only hit to the entire deck of 6 Sam. 6 Sam was tier 0 at this point. This did absolutely nothing. I guess you can't run Econ or Treacherous Trap Hole, but it only kind of hits the consistency, and the main problem with the deck wasn't necessarily being able to run Econ or Treacherous or something along those lines, but more so the fact that it was able to set up a Xian with an Inishi on the field, which, like, most decks couldn't out at that point in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. Being able to sit on something like a Spell Negate or a Trap Negate was absolutely crazy at that point in history. And even after this point, even much later into the history of Duel Links, you were still not able to actually out a Xian. Sometimes it was just that strong. So Xian's Dojo being semi-limited and that being the only hit was just not enough. Dual wield was still a thing that absolutely killed everyone. Actual Xian, as I mentioned, Inishi was crazy. They still had all of their consistency. It was just not enough. So yeah. Next up, we have the next semi-limited list, which was the Dark Lord semi-limitations and that whole meta. So Dark Lords had been dominant for quite some time up until this point, and this is where we start to see some of their limitations. This is more so to give context. I think that this ban list was pretty good overall. The biggest gripe that I have with this is World Legacy Clash. World Legacy Clash was specifically a meta call against the dominant deck that was Dark Lords. Dark Lords were able to utilize the skill Beatdown in order to get to ridiculous attack stats. Even after using Desire, losing 1,000 life points, it could still be a 2,900 beater, which is absolutely absurd. And if you know what Dark Lords actually do and how they were used in Duel Links, they basically just walked over your opponent. World Legacy Clash allowed you to basically deal with 2 different attacks from them by having a monster on your side of the field. And in the mirror matchup in particular, this was ever so useful. However, as soon as the nerf to Dark Lords arrived, and the limitation to World Legacy Clash, this card was entirely dropped basically completely out of the metagame. The limitation to 2 should mean that a lot of decks are still able to play it, but no one did. Reason being, it wasn't really necessary. With Beatdown being nerfed and no one actually playing that in Dark Lords, with Dark Lords not being able to play it themselves in order to dodge out and reset attack stats, or what have you, this card basically fell out of existence, and is still, for some reason, limited to 2. Yeah, I don't know why this is still here. Like, hello? Anyway, next up we have a skill balance, which was interesting. This is mostly to note Kybercorp Bling being an absolute pain in the ass because of the fact that it was literally a pay-to-win skill. If you had a glossy or prismatic banishment of the Dark Lord, you were able to cycle it every turn by just being able to utilize this skill, which was not once per duel, it was infinite, and also it was only if your life points were decreased by, I think, 1,000. So basically, you'd activate a Dark Lord effect, and then next turn, for a turn, you draw Banishment, which means you could do it again. So there's that. Interesting. That's all. I just wanted to note that because this was cool. But also, how did this skill ever exist, Konami? What the heck? That's all. Nothing else really of note. Dual Standby. Each player increases their card hand by 1 as well. This was to limit Amano Iwado, because now you can no longer normal summon or activate card effects on your first turn. So, I don't know what this was. This literally killed an entire skill. Yeah, thanks, Konami. This skill is now useless. Cool. Anyway, next up we have the next Forbidden list, which was the basically nail in the coffin for me, and knowing that Konami is terrible with ban lists. Let's just talk about this for a second. First of all, that Grasslook Screener was a card that had come out more recently and was limited to or unlimited as it came out, and was absolutely overpowered in a myriad of decks. I even made a little series where I covered a few decks that could abuse that Grasslook Screener to gain a massive advantage and just basically win the game due to this powerful effect. And I was basically like, hey, let's get this card banned. And It did get limited and then inevitably banned. But That Grass Looks Greener is an absolutely insane card and is currently banned in the TCG, OCG, in the TCG and in Duel Links. However, it's not banned in the OCG nor in Master Duel because reasons. However, in this game, it was absolutely overpowered thanks to Spell Specialist, allowing you to basically add it to hand for free. Like, you just drew it into your hand on turn 0. So you guaranteed the Grass Looks Greener. And with Witchcrafters and Dark Lords and Thunder Dragons and a whole bunch of other decks that were absolutely going to abuse it, yeah, it wasn't very fun. However, instead of banning a problematic card like That Grass Looks Greener, they limited it to 1 and also hit the skill. We'll talk about the skills in a second. But they also decided to semi-limit Dark Lord Ixchel, which was also on the same semi-limited list as Contact, so now you could play 1 Ixchel, 1 Contact, and 1 Sanctified, more or less killing Dark Lords. We'll get to the fact that Dark Lords come back in a second, but they also semi-limited Spectral Sword, which was the only hit to Shiranui. They semi-limited Orochi the Squall, as well as Elder. Ritual Beasts were not a good deck at this point. Limiting this was entirely because Konami hates Ritual Beasts. This is a fact. We know this, basically, because their combos take too long. This is, in fact, something that has been a problem for Ritual Beasts in the past. Their combos are basically modern-day combos, but with Duel Links and when they came out in the TCG, that was very long, and no one liked playing against it. Therefore, limit them. Limit their consistency. This was really annoying. Elder did not need to be limited in any capacity. It was not a strong card. It was not a strong deck. It was a nice little rogue option that only top players who actually knew what they were doing were being able to utilize, which I think is also why Konami decided to limit it, because Duel Links is a casual game, and Konami said, you're not allowed to play a non-casual deck. Die. We also have Palace of the Elemental Lords and Cosmic Cyclone being limited to 3, which I actually liked. That was a cool little thing. And they also released a few other cards, which was also cool. However, as for the skills, they did a few oopsies. First and foremost, Sealed Tombs was the one skill that was able to be utilized in order to stop something like Shiranui and Dark Lord, well, not Dark Lords, but more so Shiranui. In order to prevent them from just popping off, you would go Cosmic Cyclone away one of their back row, and then you would seal the tombs, preventing them from just absolutely killing you on the following turn. Great. Konami said, no, your life points now have to be 1,000 lower than your opponent's, which doesn't seem like a lot if you, like, just Cosmic Cyclone away your opponent's card. But if they see that you are playing a Shizu, they could just Cosmic Cyclone your Cosmic Cyclone, even though it's not the card that you decided to hit, and then all of a sudden you can't activate your skill, and they're able to pop off and just kill you. It's a little bit of a nerf, but honestly, nerfing Sealed Tombs was a mistake. Next up, we have the Compensation nerf as well. This was notable. This was the skill that was used by Dark Lords in order to dump multiple cards on the same turn. Now, you could only do it once per turn and twice per duel. This literally did nothing. Most of the time, you would only actually activate the Compensation once per turn anyway, and honestly, by the time you could use it multiple times in a single duel, more than twice, I should say, you've probably already won the game due to the advantage that you've gained from the Dark Lord stuff. So, honestly, yeah, Compensation being nerfed like this was more or less nothing. Granted, they hit Dark Lords again, so that was painful. And then on top of that, they nerfed probably my favorite skill in the entire game, My Monster Cards, along with Trap Layer and Spell Specialist. These all just basically allowed you to start your hand with a more likely chance of drawing into spells, traps, and monster cards, or specifically low-level monster cards. Now, Spell Specialist was absolutely overpowered thanks to That Grass Looks Greener, and would still be a played card, or a played skill, because Grass was still around. You would still play this skill, it just didn't do anything, basically. Sure, the consistency was less, but it more or less did nothing. However, My Monster Cards, the reason that this was so good was because 2 decks, more or less, Ritual Beasts, which, of course, we've talked about Konami hating Ritual Beasts, and one other deck that relied on Dark Cavalry. You basically just sat on Dark Cavalry, and that was it, which was a pretty, honestly, interesting deck overall. We're utilizing this skill. And a few other decks started to come out of the woodwork with My Monster Cards. There was a lot of cool innovation with deck building in this game because of My Monster Cards, and I really liked it. Also, Trap Layer did literally nothing. No one played this skill. Not a single person, except for like a few stall decks, and honestly, even then, they were better off playing like One Card Wonder or the skill that burns you, the other skill that burns you for each trap activated. Like, there were better options, and most people just didn't play this if they were playing some sort of stun. My monster cards was limited because, yeah, sure, it was strong, but not really, and Trap Layer didn't deserve it. So that's another really big, really bad ban list. This was the first time I really started to lose faith, as I mentioned earlier, in Konami's ban system. You know, the blackwings were absolutely dominant. Limiting Orochi the Squall, like, basically did nothing. Same with Spectral Sword being limited, like, that did nothing, but okay, cool. Thanks, Konami. Next up, we are now seeing pictures for all of these cards, which is great. Next up, we have the new Forbidden and Limited list update, which was very weird. First of all, Desynchro was used to just, like, draw an infinite amount of cards. It was really annoying, so sure. Cyberstein, limited to 1. This had a very similar problem to that Grass Look Screener, where it was just facilitating degenerate jank. Sure, limiting it to 1 means that it's more inconsistent, but the fact of the matter is, you still lost to it just as often, it felt like, because it was still there. So yeah, this was a card that should have been banned, and it just wasn't, because Konami didn't like to ban cards at this point. In fact, they hadn't banned a singular card up until this point, which is one of the major problems with Duel Links. They just, with the way that they worked their ban list system, they just didn't want to ban cards. Next up, we have Element Saber Malo. Because Purgatrio was out, they decided to limit Malo. This was probably the dumbest decision that they made, and quickly after, they would, in the next ban list, change this guy and put him back to 3, I believe. So there's that. However, next up we have the Magician of Dark Illusions at 2, because they couldn't figure out how to limit Dark Magicians in any way, shape, or form, and this would change significantly over and over and over again throughout the history of Dark Magicians. Dark Magicians basically just needed to have more cards just limited in some capacity, and I guess they decided this one. Next up they had Vion, because heroes, and then they had Crystron Rion. This was the first limitation to Crystrons, and honestly it was kind of okay, but it didn't really do a whole lot. But here is where things get really obnoxious. First and foremost, they put Charge of the Light Brigade to 3 because of Thunder Dragons. Thunder Dragon Dark was also to 3, as well as Gold Sark. Somehow Gold Sark is still not banned, which is interesting. But all things considered, Thunder Dragon Dark, Gold Sark, and Charge of the Light Brigade all being limited because of Thunder Dragons. Basically, they were saying, hey, stop doing that. Stop playing this deck. Stop utilizing Charge of the Light Brigade, even though it's a cool combo, in order to utilize the powerful effects of your Chaos monsters by getting them into the grave. How dare you do that? Stop. Yeah, I don't know why they decided to put everything to 3, but it was really annoying. As for the skills, this one was notable. No Mortal Can Resist was the skill that we switched to instead of going to Sealed Tombs, because instead of just locking down the graveyard for a turn, it would change everything into Skull Servants. It was great. We loved it. However, they decided to make it so that you had to have 2,000 less life points than your opponent, because Konami hates fun. Next up, they also nerfed Baggy Sleeves, which was kind of annoying. You got to draw 2 cards, but now it's level 7 or higher. Instead of just being able to set like a Dragon Dark or something like that, now you had to have a level 7, which was annoying. And then they also nerfed Grit, because that's what Witchcrafters were using, and Konami hates Witchcrafters. So yeah, there's that. Next up, we have Cyberstein and that Grass Look Screener finally being banned. Hip hip hooray, this should be good, right? Wrong. They killed another deck. Why? Blackbird Close was now limited to 2. Now, previously, we talked about Orochi being semi-limited as well, but previously, before Orochi had been semi-limited, another card was semi-limited as well, which was Raikiri, the Blackwing Synchro monster that pops cards. So now we have 2 cards already semi-limited, and they throw another one onto that list, meaning that now 3 cards are semi-limited, basically banning one of the cards. That card happened to be Blackbird Close, because it was the card that wasn't actually necessary for the combo. Now, Blackwings would still succeed and be playable, but they literally just banned this card without banning it, which was irritating, to say the least. Now, granted, this card was absolutely insane, and having three cards, or 3 of these Blackbird Closes was absolutely insane, but they still just basically banned a card without banning a card. Why would you not just ban the card? Because Konami wanted you to specifically be able to choose between one or the other. However, you never could, because you actually needed the other 2 cards. It was a really silly system that just didn't work, and I really hated it, and basically everyone else did. However, they killed another deck. Dark Lords were still hanging around. Yeah, Dark Lords were hanging around for a really long time. There's a reason Konami hates them, and also Decayed, for some reason. But Charge of the Light Brigade was now semi-limited to 2 in order to keep the Dark Lords out of the metagame. Charge of the Light Brigade had basically breathed new light into the Dark Lords. However, with it now being limited to 2, along with Ixchel as well as the Contact, it had kicked them out once again. They were just not playable, so there you go. On top of that, though, we had a few other minor changes. Gold Sark also being semi-limited, so that you can play multiple of the Charge of the Light Brigade and the Gold Sark with the new Thunder Dragon deck. We also had Keeper of Dragon Magic because of Alistair the Invoker, and Alistair the Invoker finally limited to 3, along with Cosmic Cyclone and Element Saber Field Spell. This means that you are no longer playing Element Saber Mono in that deck, and so they unlimited it. Good job. Sometimes Konami does good things, but also sometimes they release Star Blast and a skill that allows you to basically prevent your opponent from playing the game. Good job, Konami. Let's not talk about that one. Anyway, next up we have the very first card that has ever been banned in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. That is Invoked Cocytus. Cocytus was an absolutely insane card, and previously they had limited it to 1, which did nothing. But now it's banned, so happy days. However, they also now limited it to 1, the Anishichi, which was a Karakuri card that actually got the Karakuri cards playable. You could actually play the game with this card by itself. And with Inishi being semi-limited, which I kind of glossed over, and the restart change, which is not on here, the restart change, it basically means that Karakuri was also now killed. I don't know how Konami does it, but they just consistently kill decks. The Inishi limitation was basically a slap on the wrist to a tier 1 deck that was a long combo deck that was, honestly, I loved playing against it. Everyone else hated it. Understandable. Have a nice day. But with Inishi being limited to 1, this deck was basically in the dumpster. You basically couldn't play the game because your deck was just inconsistent. Sure, you could still make the same boards if you happened to draw the 1 of, but you were so inconsistent that was like 1 in 20, or yeah, like 1 in 20 games. It just happened so rarely that it just didn't work anymore. And so, yeah, you'll love to see it. Next up, we also have more limitations to Shiranui. They said, Shiranui, you've been around for too long. Die. Go into that hole. Dig it even deeper than you think that you need to dig it. And then bury yourself. So they limited Solitaire. Now, granted, at this time, Shiranui Squire is also semi-limited. So we have Squire, Solitaire, Sun Saga, and Spirit Master. 4 cards, semi-limited. Shiranui had been around for a while and had multiple decks at one point being at top tier, a control version and a combo version of the deck. Combo being the more heavily played, or I should say more heavily played in tournaments and the more dominant in tournaments, whereas the control was more for the latter. And so Konami decided to literally take a baseball bat and smash their brains in. It wasn't very good. Let's just say that. Then they also decided to kill Crystron. They just absolutely murked them. Crystron Citri, which, if you remember previously, Rion was also semi-limited. So with Citri and Rion, they're 2 tuners, you could only play 1 of them. But also now you can't play Recycler, which was one of their main combo starters, being able to dump a Crystron into the graveyard to get your combo started. And you can't play Gen X Controller, which allowed you to play Undyne, which would also get your combo started because all of the Crystrons were water monsters. So you could go Undyne, dump a card, and then you could get your combo started because you now had a Crystron in the graveyard, which honestly oftentimes started your combos. Now you can't play any of those, meaning the deck is now also officially dead, which honestly a lot of people really liked that deck. It was a really interesting interactive deck, which I personally hated, but there was a lot of things that you could do with that deck, and there is a reason that a lot of people really liked it. It was a really interesting play on your opponent's turn kind of style, as Crystrons are known to do. However, they decided to once again take him out to the shed in the back, and yeah, they also limited Senatus because Dragoonity was a card, or was a deck that existed for some reason. Yeah, now let's talk about Dark Magician. So Dark Magician had Magician's Rod, Magician Navigation, and Dark Illusion, all limited in some capacity, meaning you could play 2 Rod or 2 Magician Navigation and 1 of the other, but you couldn't play 3 of each, which was the entire combo. The entire combo was these 2 cards. Well, more specifically, Magician Navigation. Dark Illusion was semi-limited for reasons it literally didn't do anything, but sure. I guess it prevented them from playing, like, multiple copies of Tretch or, like, Econ or something. I remember this time. I genuinely don't know why this was limited. I still don't to this day. Fusion Reverse was limited because of Alistair the Invoker, and so was Invocation. Invocation was limited to 3 along with Alistair the Invoker, which means now you can play 2 of Alistair and 1 Invocation, or 1 Alistair and 2 Invocation, but I don't know why you would do that, along with none of these other cards. Great. Dompa came off the list in 2020. 2 years. Took 2 years for this card to come off of the list. Why? The game was so far past Dyna Turbo. Thanks, Konami. Moving on, we have Storm. Why is Storm limited to 1? Because Konami hates you personally. Why did they hate you? Because Storm was a cool card that allowed you to do some pretty interesting things, specifically with Noble Knights. This was actually one of the only hits to Noble Knights in particular, and the reason for that it was because of the skill change, which was Balance, I believe, which was not here. Okay, Balance was at some point also hit. This was also useful with Evil Eye. You could, like, pop your own cards with Evil Eye, but then, like, destroy a whole bunch of your opponent's cards, which was cool. Overall, Storm was probably the coolest ways to deal with back row in the game, because we didn't have access to, like, Twin Twister or Lightning Storm or something like that. We just had, like, I don't even think we had MST at this point. It was literally just Cosmic Cyclone and, like, a whole bunch of other really generic crap. So Storm was cool. And they said no, because it was cool. And Konami hates fun. So there's that. They also decided to limit Blue Eyes, which was pretty good. We like that. Then they also limited Star Seraph Sovereignty to 2 because it was absolutely a degenerate combo, and I agree wholeheartedly with this limitation. What I don't agree with is putting Sanctified to this limitation as well. Yeah, Dark Lords came back. They never died. I'm going to tell you right now, they never died. Star Seraph was the new lifeblood in Dark Lords. What you would do is you would normal summon a Star Seraph monster in order to go for the stick and chair combo. You would draw a whole bunch of cards throughout that combo, and then you just do, like, your standard Dark Lord stuff. It was really cool. It was really interesting. And then Konami said, no, you are now no longer allowed to play one of Ixchel, Contact, or Sanctified. And with Sanctified and Contact being your 2 ways that you actually play the game, Sanctified being able to negate a monster effect, and then Contact being able to revive your monsters from the graveyard, which you kind of have to do in Dark Lords, you basically were no longer able to play Ixchel, which honestly is fine, but also why would you not just ban Ixchel? Just ban the problem card. Obviously, Ixchel is the problem. Why is this card not banned? It's drawn cards. That was the problem. In a 20 card format where you only have 20 cards in your deck, having access to a draw 2 seems like a bit of an oversight, right? Right. Then they also limited some Luna Lights, which honestly wasn't enough. Kill them. They deserve to burn in fire. And Dragoonity Senatus came off of the list. And also, Ascalon was put to 2. I really wish I could tell you why it was limited to 2. Oh, no. I remember now. Haterunade existed. Haterunade was still a card that was not banned for some reason. Inevitably, it did get banned, but it's not here. So instead, they decided to put Ascalon on the limited list instead of the actual problem, which was Haterunade. Thanks, Konami. Moving on, we have Nekroz. Nekroz was about to come to the game, and they decided, hey, Valkyrus is an unfair card preventing you from killing your opponent. Let's kill it. So they limited it to 1. Why? Now, granted, I think the idea was because Nekroz would allow you to slow the game down because of Valkyrus. Because, like, I don't know. Like, yeah, you can technically banish a Nekroz in order to stop the battle phase, which was probably the best battle trap that we had. Or I should say battle hand trap, which is, like, the only hand traps that we had. So there's that, because we didn't have access to Swift Scarecrow or anything like that. So, sure, I guess that makes sense in theory, but the thing is, Nekroz entirely relies on being able to stop your opponent from killing them, because their monsters are kind of dinky. They're ritual monsters. They kind of rely on having dinky monsters, and then inevitably building their way towards more powerful. Just, that's more so the nature of Nekroz, right? And being able to survive due to Valkyrus was really advantageous. However, with Valkyrus limited to 1, Nekroz did literally nothing. We didn't even get Trishula in the first wave of support. and we also never got Colossalus. So the deck was incredibly inconsistent, and this was a nerf that just wasn't warranted. It didn't do anything. As you can see now, Necroz is unlimited, and it only ever saw a rogue amount of competitive success. So, okay. Next up, we have the second to last ban list that I want to talk about, which is this one in particular. So this one needs some context that I didn't actually grab because I already had too many tabs. So, Swallow's Nest was limited to 2 because of Harpies. Harpies had several other cards also limited to 2, which means that they were only allowed to play those cards and not Swallow's Nest. Swallow's Nest was absolutely insane in this deck. You basically were able to OTK your opponent more easily. You were able to proc your Harpy Slash Lady, or Harpy Cyber Slash Lady, or something like that, the Synchro monster, more easily. You were able to gain powerful effects by, like, if your monster was targeted or going to be like dealt with, like with Book of Moon or Floodgate Trap Hole, before they were able to stick on the field, you could tribute them off in order to play around that. So at this point, the Harpies had been killed. This was the one saving grace for the deck because they were able to actually continue playing through a lot of the opponent's back row and then get into their own plays and more easily OTK and stuff like that. But with this limitation, as well as the limitations to the other cards that had been semi-limited, the deck kind of just died and slowly petered out. This one wasn't as big of like a kneecap as a lot of the other ones, but where this limitation goes a bit too far was with Dragon Dark being once again limited to 3, which had to come off of the list and on the list and it's back and it's yada yada. And Chaos Dragon Levianeer being limited to 3. So now, the Thunder Dragons having multiple cards limited to 3, as well as Levianeer limited to 3, means that they were all even more inconsistent. Thunder Dragons just have been taking a beating this entire time, and just constantly have cards on and off the limited list. They're still probably the best deck in terms of a no ban list format, because of just how absurdly powerful their cards are, with things like Levianeer, with the overall Thunder Dragons being able to go into powerful Xyz and the like, but more importantly, because of how many cards are absolutely just slapped on there as an emergency or like pseudo hit to the deck. They never really banned anything because there wasn't really any too big of problem. There weren't too many big problematic cards to win Thunder Dragons, but okay, it's still a bit weird. Oh, and then Gagagas existed. Alright, talking about Onomats reminded me of something, and that is the skills that also just got absolutely nuked into oblivion, that inevitably created either overpowered or just nerfed decks. So let's quickly talk about the skills. Now, the skills didn't really start to see major updates until about 2020, at which point we got probably the least notable update in skills, with Ultimate Dragons being able to add Twin Burst. That was it. It just added Twin Burst, and it also now allows you to reveal two Blue Eyes in hand on turn 3 onward to add a Polymerization. This was the skill that pushed Blue Eyes into tier 1 contention, and the only reason why they were at all playable. I was the first adopter of this. You can literally check it out from when I made the video on my Blue Eyes deck in whenever the new Blue Eyes support came out. Everyone else was playing Alternative Evolution. I was the first one to play Ultimate Dragons. It was me. Anyway, that's not the important part. Ultimate Dragons swiftly made Blue Eyes top tier by getting rid of the 2 dead cards in your hand, Blue Eyes White Dragon. So yeah, you could just summon out this guy, which was really difficult to deal with and still is, and can just win you the game by itself. Thanks, Konami. Next up, we have ourselves another big skill change. As you can see, lots of skills were changed. However, only a few of them really mattered. First of all, what grows in the graveyard was utilized in a very specific attack to end on some pretty interesting boards, going through like Zen mains and stuff like that. Gone. Can't play it anymore. Master of Destiny. Gone. Can't use it anymore. Just absolutely neutered. Your normal draw is skipped, as well as you can only begin the duel if you have 7 or more cards with different names that require coin tosses, which already was an insane amount of cards. And yeah, so Master of Destiny is now dead. Transcendent Crystals is now dead because of Crystrons. Or no, I think this was a buff. I forget what this one is used. No, yeah, it was nerfed because you required 7 or more Crystal Beast monsters in your deck. We also had the See You Later, which was utilized with Dark Lords in order to nerf them. But the biggest ban list change for skills was all of the generic hand enhancement skills. Balance, Restart, Spell Specialist, Trap Layer, My Monster cards, or Heavy Starter all had these same limitations, which basically killed every single one of them. You cannot special or activate monster effects on the until the end of your first main phase. Straight up non-activatable. The only deck that utilizes any of these at this point is Warrocks. Warrocks with Balance. That's it. That's the only one. And that's because Warrocks don't activate any monster effects until the battle phase anyway, so that's not really that big of a deal. I guess Gokdos technically, but like, okay, who cares? Honestly, this was a huge and utterly undesirable nerf. This killed so many decks, and most importantly, prevented you from basically playing any sort of generic skill with an archetype. Meaning, archetypes like Karakuri, Noble Knights, and Dark Lords, Ritual Beasts, etc. could no longer realistically have a chance against a lot of the anime decks that got a lot of really powerful skills. This was a step in the wrong direction, and one of the last straws that really broke the camel's back for at least me when it came to Duel Links. I legitimately stopped playing this game so much more because of this update. Right? The game wasn't dead for me. I still played it occasionally, and I was still making content on it, but I really cared a lot less because the game sucked at this point. It was so much more about anime skills, and it was less about actual just like fun, rewarding skills like Balance or what have you. Moving on, we have our next update to skills, which was Onomats. Now, Onomats, this was a nerf. Onomat play is now exchanging 1 card at a time instead of 2, but instead you can use it twice per duel. This made this deck tier 0. Yep, legitimately, a nerf made the deck from tier 1 to tier 0. Now, honestly, Onomats were never really tier 0 in terms of actual 65 or 60% representation in top cuts. It only ever got to about 60 in one tournament I ever saw, and that was right after the Top Player Council, which is the guys who decide on the tier list in on the Duel Links meta website, saying that it was tier 0, but that's beside the point. It was tier 0, and it was because of this change. Onomat play was absolutely insane. Being able to constantly add, or not constantly, but being able to add 2 cards throughout the course of the duel was way better than adding 2 at the same time. This means that you could add 1 to make sure your combo goes through, and then add the second one to gain recursion. So you could actually finish out the duel. You use 1 to stop your opponent or prevent them from breaking your board, and then the second one to kill them. Great, Konami. Thank you. Just truly phenomenal. This also came with another bad ban list with Storm being limited. Yeah, truly a phenomenal update there. And then we had the change to so many skills that heavily incentivized the use of anime skills, right? Or I guess this was the limitation. They had already buffed them, so this is a lot of the limitations. Onomat play, finally nerfed. Good. The deck's now dead. It literally dies because Onomat play is dead. Great. Love to see it. Also, a lot of the other cards had also been limited. Like I think Rhino Bus, Gagaga Head, and Gagaga Sister were all limited to 2, which was one of the main reasons to play the deck, being able to go into Gagaga Head as follow-up to go into Rhino Bus or something like that. You could also go Gagaga Sister to get your level 6s to go into Rhino Bus as well. So yeah, it was just a lot of like really silly stuff. We had Demon's Resonance because the Resonators were taking up a huge portion of the competitive scene, had also been nerfed and basically killed them off. We have Dragonite's Path, now requiring you to return a monster. This did inevitably kill the deck, but it was more of a slow burn just because of power creep mostly. Set Delta Excel also killed TGs. Because now you just summon this, I think, instead of like... No, it wasn't Set Delta Excel. It was the other one. Never mind, this didn't do anything. And the Strap Hell was nerfed, which didn't really do anything. Cyberstyle, that was the other one. Cyberstyle changed from being able to add multiple Cyber Proto-Dragons, which basically called themselves Cyber Dragons, to your field, instead to just having a 1 Cyber Dragon with 0 attack. And you can only summon Cyber End Dragon. This was a huge nerf to the way the deck was previously played, and it was because they wanted to give you a different skill. This was really obnoxious. The way that the deck was previously played was also a really toxic deck, so I don't hate it, but it was basically pushing this deck away and forcing you to play the other version of it, utilizing the new cards from the new structure deck so that you had to pay money to get the new cards and play them. It was just dumb overall. And this all culminates in what I believe to be just the dumbest thing Konami has probably ever done. And that is the most recent ban list. Gazelle and Roar limited to 1 alongside things like Treacherous Trap Hole and Econ. There it is. Salamangreat is one of the coolest decks that has come out of Duel Links in a hot minute. And it was increasing the power level, where most of the time the power level was decreasing with Duel Links. A lot of the power level dynamics had been going down since Dark Lords and since Invoked and a lot of those decks. Dark Lords were a deck from 2019 that came out in Yu-Gi-Oh! At that time in both the TCG and in Duel Links, and because of that, they dominated in Duel Links. Invoker came out in like 2016 or something like that. No, Dark Lords came out in 2018. I don't remember. Anyway, Invoker came out in 2016 and dominated in 2019 through a myriad of time, and ever since then, ever since Shiranui, Blackwings, well, not Blackwings, Shiranui, Invoked, and Dark Lords, Konami has decreased the power level up until Salamangreat. And with Salamangreat, we got a tier 0 format. Understandably so, a lot of people weren't exactly happy and did want the nerf. However, Konami decided to take away basically the 2 cards that actually make the deck what it is. That being, either you take away Gazelle, preventing your recursion or continued plays, continuing your combos, and really giving you the plays that you have with Salamangreat Gazelle, and also also taking away Roar. Now, Roar is the main reason to play the deck. Granted, you only have one of these anyway, but limiting them to 1 means that you can only play one or the other. And with Salamangreat Roar being the card that is most likely dropped, this means the main selling point of what Salamangreat was is now gone. And this is a more recent ban list, so who knows, this may have not killed the deck. But the thing is that this sets a precedent that means that Konami is more likely... Oh, also, one thing to note, Salamangreat was a great free-to-play friendly option. It wasn't really free-to-play. You required a lot of, like, URs from old boxes, like Needle Sealing and stuff like that. You needed the new box sets, or the new box cards as well, like Triple Circle and the like, which also, for some reason, Circle is on here as well, limited to 3, because Konami really hated this deck. So there's that. But it was a really free-to-play friendly option. And as soon as it was this is also the first ban list post Salamangreat. And as soon as it came out, it was promptly neutered. Just absolutely gutted, right? The power level of the game was going up. It was increasing. We were able to play more competent, more fun strategies, similar to the nature of Dark Lords and Thunder Dragons and the things that people loved in the past. And Konami came along and swatted it away. What more can I say? Konami, you're doing a great job with Duel Links. You truly are. It is incredible to see the absolute sheer amount of greed that you showcase every day with every single one of your updates to this game. It is a beautiful game that has done so much and has introduced so many people to the world of speed duels, and has been a great casual and competitive experience that you have decided to throw into the gutter with the rest of the garbage that you so effortlessly hate on. Thank you. Fuck you, Konami. Anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy. If you did, I like it very much, so appreciate it. And if you want to check out more content like this, as well as more Yu-Gi-Oh!, then just be sure to subscribe. Sorry this took so long, but thanks for sticking around. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.